I was set up for abuse. I've been abused by everyone my whole life. I can't take it anymore. It will never stop. Nobody cares. I don't want to live anymore. What should I do? Disclaimer. I know I come from a point of extreme privilege when I write about this. I have got incredible love and support from my childhood friend. Met him when we were 15, now husband. Even when I had felt exactly this way for years together, I could always hope for a better life just because of him. And it indeed got better. As much as people say we make our lives better, it is incredibly difficult to do this all alone. You can have all the understanding and intent, but there has to be a lingering hope. At some point, I did feel I didn't deserve friends, never even thought of a partner, or any respectful interpersonal relationship apart from the toxic, abusive bond I had with my family members at home. My sibling not only sexually assaulted me, but also when the assault stopped, he took control of my social life. From threatening to call me insane because I go to therapy in my college Facebook group, where he entered because of his political connections despite not being an alumni, I kept on shortening my circle. Left Facebook, hardly had any social media. It was a big deal back in those years. Deleted most friends. Until when he was in my friend list, he regularly abused people over political non-alignment on my open wall. These people, who I had known for years, would stop talking to me overnight because my sibling had abused them over my social media page. He had an awful control over how I led my life. I was angry, but I couldn't do much. I was forced to remain in contact with him. Eventually, I did stop contact after he threatened to murder me in 2017 because me speaking up about the abuse was a threat to his false identity created over social media. 2017, I stopped contact with him. Gradually, small changes accumulated to make it big. I have thriving interpersonal relationships, friendships, social circle now. Everyone in my close circle have now seen what my sibling is capable of. Most of them know what I faced, and I don't have to hide in fear anymore or be treated disrespectfully just because my family treated me this way. I do not chase unhealthy friendships anymore. I can respectfully walk away without attributing it to, I deserve it. It will probably take a lifetime, but I feel less unworthy today than I did yesterday, on most days. From truly believing I can't have anyone who treat me better than my family does, I finally have almost everyone who treats me better than my family does. It took so many years, but it happened. Abuse changes how we look at ourselves. In the face of extreme powerlessness, we attribute it to, we deserve it. We are meant to be treated this way. We are unlucky, and make peace with our inability to stop or confront the abuse. We need to free ourselves from the abuser and his power in all possible ways. Even today, I can see nightmares of my abuser groping me and then hysterically laughing while I am crying. I sometimes wake up feeling his touch over my body the whole day. Those are my days of extreme vulnerability. Those are my days where I want to scrape off my skin, scream, cry, and hit myself until the feeling of his touch over my body goes away. These are becoming less frequent now, but you can imagine feeling like this every day. That is how it was when I was in contact with my abuser, or when I had willingly invited my enabler parents to stay with me at my house for the rest of my life. You need to see what you truly deserve. Life is surely not going to be easy, but you will find better days, I can assure you. Slowly and gradually, your life will turn better. We were together for more than 2 years. There were ups and downs, but overall it was good. That's also my first relationship. He broken up with me 2 weeks ago because he told me something has changed and it wasn't Gret between us anymore. He met someone and he wants to try again. He was meeting her nearly every day and making love with her while I was alone, crying. I told him to come and take his things, but earlier told him that I know a way that he can repair it because I don't know how to let it go. He is very emotionally immature. He was scared to talk. He couldn't feel love, guilt, etc., very closed. He told me during taking his things that he really regret what he did, that it might have been this with me. He saw children and being a wife and a husband, and even though he was scared that it won't came, he really thought about proposing earlier. He told me that there was few situations that he installed Tinder, swiped and uninstalled immediately, or talked with someone only a bit, and then uninstalled it fast. There was once a situation he was sending nudes with a girl for 4 weeks. I was very cold usually towards him. It's important to say I am emotionally immature also. I was always fake mad, so give me attention. I was saying awful things, so he felt unwanted only because I could. I was hurting him too, making his ego smaller. He told me he don't know why he did it, that maybe he has intrinsic problems, that he was scared to tell me to try those things. I had very small libido with him, and it's probably also important to tell it was long-distance relationship. Why do I want him back? My friends hate him because of he did to me now. My family never cared. I'm ashamed of his family because they knew I told them. I don't know what to do. Why I don't feel untrust towards him. Why I don't feel really hurt now because of it. I don't feel how much he made me hurt. While in my apartment to take his stuff, he cried a lot. He begged me to get back, that he really don't know what to do and he wants to change it because he don't want anyone else and he want it to be me. I told him to go to therapy, that he can show me he really care to change and get back. I gave him half of a year. He has to go to therapies and prove me he wants to get back. If he met anyone or talked to anyone, didn't come back. I also want to go therapy now. Through this half of a year, we have a break. No contact, only from time to time to show me his progress, and that he go to the therapy. I don't know if I would get back to him after this year, but I really want it to be him. That if the fact that we can't talk because of closed emotions change, it could be a normal relationship. I understood him well because we have the same problem and we both want to change it and repair themselves. I don't know what to do, dump him or get back if he really want to repair his cheating and talking problem. I just don't know. I don't want anyone new. I can't feel emotions as him, so this relationship was super even in that cause. I didn't know why his affairs don't hurt me that much and I still want him back. I feel guilty because a normal person would dump him. But I don't want to make love without this connection, and feeling isn't something that hurt me. He was very loving and caring. He was afraid to tell me he loves me, but he showed it all the time. Do you believe that if he wants to, he really can change, and it might work if we both go to therapy and want to change it? Is it even possible? I see his crying and closure as asking for help. I would probably do the same, but I have different kind of immatureness. I was also a bit flirty with some men, but never cheated. What to do? I feel like no one understands me. I had known Michelle since childhood. She was always a bit snobbish and was desperate to be part of the in crowd in high school, but they wanted little to do with her, put off by her superior attitude. I never realized that she only hung out with me because she didn't have anything else to do until after high school. We would make plans to hang out together, but if something better came along, she would ditch me. It was like everyone could see that she was a bad friend except for me. She changed even further when she met a nice guy and decided to settle down with him. Everything revolved around her fiancé, maybe because she had never had a real boyfriend before. I don't know. All I knew was that she stopped texting me to hang out, and when I texted her, she was always busy. I was invited to the wedding and I went solo as I did not have a date at the time. The bridal side of the wedding party consisted of her sister and her 2 gay guy friends. One of those friends later told me that they were only in the wedding party because she wanted to make a statement. I had a good time chatting with her family and intended to leave the wedding at about 11 p.m. to go back to my hotel room. Michelle came up to me at 10:30 and asked if I would drive her and her new husband to their lodging for the night. I'm the kind of person who would never leave a friend high and dry, so I agreed to drive her and her husband to wherever they needed to go. I went out to my car and made sure there was room for extra passengers. Then I went back inside to wait for them. Then 1 a.m., the 2 gay guys drove back to the hotel and texted me to tell me to drive safe as it had gotten foggy. 2 a.m. came, and at this time, most of the guests had left. 3 a.m., I'm assisting in the cleanup. Meanwhile, Michelle and her siblings are drunkenly singing along to Michelle's iPod. She'd been too cheap to get a DJ. As I helped her dad take out the garbage, he looks at me with pity in his eyes, and he tells me, "You're a good friend, Ashley." At 4 a.m., the bride and groom are finally ready to call it a night. I drove them to their lodging, about a half hour out of my way, and then went back to my hotel. Michelle didn't contact me again for months, and any texts I sent her were either ignored or rejected. A few months after I started dating my now husband, we went to visit a different friend, and she was there too. She was very rude to my boyfriend. We all knew each other in high school, and she scorned him because he was a geek back then. He wasn't popular. After that, we had little contact, and she never offered a congratulations when I got engaged. I would have thought that she would have liked the way he proposed, as he used a Harry Potter wand, and both Michelle and I had been huge fans of the series. But she said nothing. I saw her once in the springtime, before I sent out my invitations. She was helping her grandmother clean up her yard as I was driving by with my fiancé. I pulled over. I had a nice chat with her grandmother, but Michelle wouldn't look me in the eye and shut down any conversation I attempted to have with her. Finally, my fiancé urged me to go, so we continued driving to my parents' place. As we are there, my fiancé tells my mom about the exchange. She was trying her heart out to talk to Michelle, and that bitch just ignored her. My mom agreed that she had always disliked Michelle for the way she always treated me. I was slowly opening my eyes to who Michelle really was. I debated even inviting her to my wedding. I decided to be the bigger person and put the invite in the mail. The next day, my maid of honor, who also knew Michelle since childhood, asked if I was inviting Michelle. Apparently, Michelle told her that even if she wasn't invited, she would crash my wedding. I said that I sent her an invite, so that dashed her plans of making a scene. Michelle texted me and told me she would be coming to the wedding. I also invited Michelle's parents to my wedding, and about 2 months before my wedding, her mom said, "Thank you, but we are going to be away that weekend. We have to go clean up Michelle's grandpa's old cabin. It's been 11 years since he passed, and my brother and I have finally made plans to do it now. I will send my card with Michelle. Have a great day and congratulations." 5 days before the wedding, we are getting the final numbers for the caterer. I texted Michelle to confirm that she and her husband were still intending on coming, as I didn't have an official RSVP. She texted me back. That was the plan. However, last-minute plans were made to go through some of my grandpa's things, which I should really be part of. I meant to text you earlier than today. Reading that text brought back every single excuse she had ever given me when she had something better come along, whenever we had made plans to hang out or do something. I knew very well that the plans to go sort through her grandpa's things were not last minute. I knew very well that had I not texted her, she would not have texted me and would have just been a no-show, and I would have had to pay for the uneaten food. I finally realized that she was not a friend to me. She would use me unless something better came along. Suddenly, her father's pity for me after Michelle's wedding made sense. He knew that she was using me, and I was too naive to see it. He knew that she regarded me as a last resort, someone who would always help her out unquestioningly, but was not worthy of her time. I texted back, "Do what you've got to do. I get it." And I finally did. I finally knew what kind of person she was. It was the last thing I ever texted or said to her. That was 3 years ago. In that time, I've gone on to have a sweet baby boy. She got divorced because she was cheating on her husband. I guess something better came along there too. What's the hardest part about getting older? The loneliness. How you quickly become invisible, lose a sense of purpose as soon as you stop working. Your children leave your home, and especially if you have been a questionable parent. Not everyone can maintain a healthy mental state. Try to find new engagements when they retire. At this stage of life, people mostly tend to look back and lament the mistakes they made, the losses, and in most cases, the calculations do not make one very happy. I knew my parents didn't share the best relationship, and they would be effectively dead mentally if left alone. Despite the awful childhood they gave me, I decided to keep them close, make them important and relevant even when it meant emotional suicide for me every day inside my own house. Staying with my family would have kept them engaged and relevant. They wouldn't have to fight the loneliness, the lack of motivation to get up in the morning when you have nothing to look forward to. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. They harmed me over and over, and as much as I tried to reconcile and forgive when they spoke even slightly softly to me, all of those were lies. All of those were simply ploys to make sure I was not doing anything against their rapist son. I, as I had always known but never believed, was just for profit and nothing beyond that. They have no feelings, no regards for me. They find it perfectly justified when I go running to them, wasting money, time, leaves, etc., whenever they lie and portray an urgency, and they use it just for another of their selfish personal gains, personal means, something for their criminal son. They find it perfectly justified to think since they were a crappy parent to their equally crappy son, the son had the right to molest me for all those years. When I lament how alone they are now, how they get up and walk around that house without any sense of purpose or anything good to look forward to during the day, I read their emails, the call records and their chats where they have lied to me over and over, lied to the police, to the neighbors, and have accused us of absolutely unimaginable things. The son who beat his parents up 1,000 times more than how much he was beaten up as a child has the audacity to claim he never took revenge on anyone for harming him, but apparently by talking about what he did, I am taking revenge on him. I could understand not landing him in jail part, but he wants complete silence, acceptance that he never did anything, and my parents find it absolutely justified. They keep on making severe false allegations against me, and my husband now, to ensure I am pressured, and I do what they say. Most people around me who have seen this case from legal and psychological angle has said that the only reason they can do all of this is because they think, irrespective of all of this, I will still look after them, if they genuinely need it. The hardest part about getting old is loneliness. I realized it and I tried to be there, but I finally couldn't. Even if I let alone the actively harming me, lying about me part, I had kept maid for everything. They didn't have to do any chores here in my house. Yet they, or their rapist son, claimed I kept them here for help. What help exactly? As long as they were with me in my house, we catered to their needs without even thinking twice. Cook had left for 20 days in between when I was at the 8th month of pregnancy, and she told me I cooked for you silently for 20 days. There is no cook at her house or her son's house where she used to visit so often. Not anymore since the son can't afford/won't afford medical care for my father who has cancer now. But for me, I even kept a maid for cleaning and arranging the bed, our cupboards, everything. Yet the son later claimed I was using them, my parents. The son cannot accept someone can be genuinely selfless to their parent, the same way my parents can't accept my husband can be a genuinely loving person. They have to see people in the same standards as themselves and find out a convoluted logic on why someone has been nice to them. I was nice to my parents as I needed their help. My husband probably wants money, some weird fucked up logic. They will probably die alone, lonely and sad, protecting a son that won't even lift his finger for them. He came to India last time to get false letters, money, and left the second he felt he was safe. Mother tried to claim he helped with father's medical treatment, but thankfully there is enough proof now that he didn't. I will try very hard to not be anywhere near them. It is just deeply sad and a very lonely feeling for me too. During Durga Puja this year, despite our awful relationship with them, we did go and try to spend the puja with them. Needless to say, the situation was so bad that we couldn't even think straight for the next few weeks, even now. On Diwali, while decorating my home, I cried profusely because I used to send a person to my parents' house who would put all festive lights on the house. Once, years back, my mother had said she was sad that her house wasn't decorated, and she or my father wasn't fit enough to do it themselves, and I ensured it was done every year after that, whenever they were not in my house with me during Diwali. Needless to say, the emotions are very different for my sibling, though. Every Rocky, every Bifanta. I never cry. I grew up knowing his evil side every moment of the day. I remember how disgusting he was, even during each of these festivals, the greed, the petty things he would do. So no, I don't miss a relationship with him for the most part. Yes, when others talk about decent sibling relationships, it causes me to simply avoid it, say a one-liner about it. But I remotely don't lament it. Just a few minutes back, I booked a hotel with a friend where I was supposed to go with them, my parents. I was in this constant battle with myself to do better for them, because that was my locus of control. Unhealthy, but so was it. But I have to, for once, live for myself, and they will probably be alone now. A couple of hours after writing this answer, I watched the movie A Man Called Otto. An awful choice for the day indeed made me feel even more awful. I truly hope all parents who are old, alone, get someone young to fill their lives with hope and energy every morning. Can one experience flashbacks of terrible childhood experiences while pregnant? How would this affect the baby if they are born? Pregnancy and post-childbirth are two brutal phases. I had a phase in my life of nightmares where my siblings' past sexual offenses on me would come back to be recurrent every night, to the point where I would refuse to sleep. I had not slept for 5 nights, except for 1-2 hours during the day. Things got terrible to a point where it was affecting my exam performance, especially during the preparation of government exams. On days I didn't have the sexual nightmares, I would be in a constant fight with my parents, trying to prove that what they and their son did to me was wrong. I deserved love and empathy, not their criticism/anger/justification that all that happened to me wasn't a big deal. I had cried to my therapists that I was scared to sleep. Gradually, the nightmares did get less frequent, especially after 2021. I started my present job, used to come back extremely tired, physically, and sleep better. I would still get nightmares, but they became less vivid, less disturbing. The very disturbing ones would come less frequently, but it all came back during pregnancy, and it will, for sure, come back over and over in life at different phases and triggers. But for families with toxic abuse, post-childbirth is a far worse phase than the pregnancy. 2022 was the year of pregnancy, and God, that was beyond difficult. Every night was a torture, especially after 5th month, when I got a peek at my ultrasound and saw my baby being a son. It got worse. All my life, I wanted to be a girl mom. I couldn't possibly imagine I could love a male child, since what I saw in my sibling was beyond horrifying. Add to that my superstitious mother always quoting a Sanskrit para that meant male babies go after their maternal uncles. For my baby, it would be my sexual abuser sibling. Already, I always felt parenthood would be a very bad challenge for me. Add to that a male baby, pregnancy hormones, and the horrible past. I had the worst possible time. My parents, the people who unapologetically enabled my rape and abuse, was mostly in my house. This added to my emotional vulnerability even further. I regretted the pregnancy every day while also being terrified of losing the baby to miscarriage. Because of the way I was feeling / my apprehension that nothing good could happen to me / and guilt for feeling this way, I had a healthy full-term pregnancy. I had even worse nightmares after having the baby. I found it very difficult to even connect with him during the first few days. My husband is beyond amazing in all aspects, not just because he took care and still takes care of the baby. He had a hunch that I would be a very easy prey to PPD. He ensured to take excellent care for me and our baby. He took over the child care completely, forced me to rest and heal, which I wasn't comfortable doing when baby was under my mother's care for the first 2-3 weeks. My mother cooked once for 20 days while we had to change cook and I was pregnant. She made sure I regret taking that help from her. I am remotely not comfortable in taking help from anyone other than my husband. He kept reassuring me that I was being a great mother, took care of me and the baby without any help from anyone while holding a full-time job. I recovered fine, went on traveling several countries with our baby even before he crossed 1 year, created some happy memories amid a lot of chaos. We are emotionally drained and probably depressed too, but we are extremely busy. The baby, our jobs, travel plans, etc. keep us distracted for most parts of the day. We do have rough days. Both of us gained a lot of weight, have relied on food to feel good at times. Today, we came back from a 9 hours drive. Husband and I both are extremely tired. He said even for one night, if both of us got some relief, if someone looked after our baby and allowed us some rest, it would be so nice. But most days, we are relieved that we don't take help from people who are a disgrace to the word family. We see every child in our housing society being celebrated by extended families and feel sad for our son. Just today, during the World Cup finals, all our co-workers watched it on big screen, but we couldn't go because our son was very cranky after a long drive, and there was nobody to cater to him other than us. I asked my husband to go, but eventually we just watched the live score. Even on our worst days with the baby, our parents not only don't help us, but if communication happens, usually blame us, criticize us, ask for things, time, more physical effort from us for them. We have been forced to keep distance from them, and they word it as, "You are depriving us from our grandchild." We faced tremendous emotional and physical hurdles. The baby is 9 months now, but we managed it. Our baby seems fine too, a happy, outgoing social kid. If you have had a toxic childhood, it is probably a similar dysfunctional family dynamics for you. We managed fine because we love each other. We are not keeping a score of who does more for the baby. We do it together, even when we don't have any energy left. Some days I take over, some days he does. Even if he does more, he doesn't ever try to tell that to me. If I say it, he reminds me of what I bring to the table that he can't bring. We are very happy with each other as partners. That makes being a parent slightly easier. Don't have a child if your partner isn't good enough to compensate for how terrible your family is. You not only need to be fair and good to your baby and supply his basic needs, but also you have to be a happy parent. Time will say if my son suffers from any consequences of my nightmares. He used to wake up screaming from his sleep, all of a sudden heartbreaking screaming and crying. I used to be scared if it is because of my nightmares that now he is seeing them. But I guess all babies do that. Husband and I love every moment of our life with him, even when we can't physically cater to him but are compelled to. I've gone through multiple occasions in which I learned someone needs to be cut out of my life. When it came to friends, it was because they didn't embody what true friends were, meaning we only ever went out and partied together. There was no real depth or being there for each other. They just used me as someone to be seen out with, to drive them around or crash at my house. In a lot of ways, these were competitive friends. We didn't raise each other up, but instead were constantly comparing one another. If they didn't make me feel good, I cut them out. I needed to grow up, and going out to bars and partying were no longer my only priorities. I just recently had a best guy friend who I had to cut out too. It wasn't easy at all. We were super close, but he would make inappropriate comments to me about how he was attracted to me, didn't respect my significant other, and lied about his alcoholism. Turned out, he was still an active alcoholic, and always needed to borrow money from me. Often, BC, he was stealing from his work safe or cash register. As close as we were, and as often as we talked, I couldn't ignore how he was using me. Eventually, after he failed to get the money he borrowed back to me on time, I told him I couldn't borrow him money again. I just wasn't comfortable doing it, and it was straining our friendship. I expected him to apologize and say he wouldn't ask again. Instead, he snapped. He started insulting me, saying I thought I was better than him, would intentionally rub my money in his face, which is laughable, and amp XYZ. I decided then and there that I was done. I told him I couldn't be friends anymore, if this was even a friendship, and proceeded to block him. He then started writing negative reviews on my business page, pretending to be a customer. I'd always known you shouldn't borrow money out to friends. Yet, despite knowing better, I broke my cardinal rule. Needless to say, we are anything but friends now. I feel something akin to hatred for him now. Another more poignant example would be my parents. My mom is a malignant narcissist, and Dad, the classic enabler. My brother, the golden child. My childhood and early adulthood was nothing but scapegoating and abuse. I never thought I'd be able to break the cycle and go NC. I never knew when the right time would be, and didn't want to lose all contact with my dad, who I was always close to my whole childhood. Eventually, things came to a head when they learned I moved to CA for a job at Oracle, and they attempted to break into my house in WI. My neighbors caught them, so did our ADT cameras, and I was done. I could hear their dialogue, and it was disgusting. I also had access to their phone plan and could see they were on the phone to my brother, leading up to them being on my front porch, so he was a participant in it. They only knew my then fiance was also in CA to visit me BC. I told my brother about it that morning. He was, but also as a test, to see if he'd tell my parents everything I said. Clearly he did, and I was done with them all. It's been 5 years, and they've never apologized. They've sent messages guilting me to respond, inviting me to random events like nothing's wrong, etc., but not once have they taken responsibility for their actions or apologized. Typical NPD behavior. I'm happy I'm NC, and my life has improved exponentially. Cutting someone out of your life can be hugely difficult, but it's nothing compared to the damage that's done if you let them keep poisoning your future. I'm a big believer in the idea that you become who you're closest to, meaning if you surround yourself around 3 crackheads, you'll be the 4th. Surround yourself around 3 toxic people, you'll be poisoned. But if you surround yourself around, are you still in touch with the first person you ever dated? No, as he's serving a federal prison sentence. We met in college. A Christian college, I might add. We had a class together by accident. That Christmas, he asked me out to holiday banquet. Very formal affair. We didn't see each other for long when we decided being friends was for the best. And we were, except his idea of friendship was an awkward, suffocating experience. He constantly called or dropped by when I was at work. He worked nights while I worked days. I swear, I don't know when he slept. And because he was up all night at work, he would call me in the dead of night. If I didn't answer, he would continue calling until I either answered or silenced my phone. I had a group of people from college that was friends with. About 15 of us would get together on weekends. Well, Paul would ask to be invited. I did, to be kind. But I wondered sometimes if a day could pass where I didn't have communication with him in some way. Time passed, and we all graduated college and moved in our lives. But Paul moved about 10 miles away from where I ended up living. Great. He was still everywhere I was. He joined the same church as me and started showing up at my job all the time again. Finally, I sat him down. I explained that I needed some space. I needed some time where he wasn't always where I was. I wanted to date and get married eventually, but I couldn't because he was around me so much that men assumed we were dating. He was crushed. If you get married, your husband won't want me to talk to you. You can't do that, he complained. Yeah, that's the idea of marriage, where you choose one man to be faithful to. Yep, he probably won't want me seeing another man every single day. That is true. Little did I know I'd just set a ticking time bomb. I took a vacation with some friends, a married couple. We were gone for 2 weeks. I turned my phone off. My gosh, I'd forgotten what life was like to not have it constantly ringing. But when I returned, I was greeted with his intense anger. Where had I been? What had I done? How late had I stayed out? Had I met any men? Had I gone on dates? He peppered me with questions, as if he were a jealous lover, and not merely a good guy friend. I stopped him. I explained that my private life wasn't any of his business, that if I went on dates or met someone, I wasn't required to report to him. He lost it, screaming, yelling, throwing things. That's it. Enough. You have gone too far, and I've had enough. We need to go our separate ways. I hate to say it because we've been friends for years, but you cannot act this way. It isn't appropriate, and you've crossed my boundaries too many times. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing from him. I was starting to relax when, ring! It was the weekend, and I was up late watching a movie when my phone started ringing from an unknown number. Curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. I'll hurt you. You will cry, and I interrupted the strange, whispered voice. Who the heck are you? And what do you think you're doing calling me in the middle of the night? I used my stern teacher voice. Click. The phone went dead. I pulled out my arm and loaded it. I placed it in my nightstand and went to sleep. Monday morning, when I arrived at work, I was met by some coworkers that were concerned. Annie, you need to hear this, I was told, and followed them to the school office. Someone dialed the voicemail on the phone and put it on speakerphone. Over and over, one after another, were voice recordings in garbled or whispered voices, threatening to destroy me, calling me a whore and worse, growling into the phone. It had filled up the voicemail box. My heart sunk. I knew deep down who it was. My boss called me into his office. He had a background in security, not security as in a mall cop or security system for your home, but security, the kind involving the alphabet agencies of government and the military. Who is targeting you? Do you know? He asked. Oh yeah, I knew. And he knew him too. The police got involved and phone records were pulled, but the calls came from prepaid phones under no name. We knew who it was, but had no proof. Meanwhile, every night he filled up the voicemails of my phone and my work phone. Then I was walking across the parking lot of Walmart when I felt someone's eyes on me. I looked up to see his truck flying across the parking lot and into the road. Oh my God, he's following me now? I couldn't prove it, but he began showing up in public places at the same time as me. What could I do? It was in public, so it wasn't like I could complain when he had a right to be there as much as anyone else. Until one Friday night, a group of friends and I went out to eat. It was a group of men and women, and while some of them were dating, I wasn't dating anyone. But one of the guys did sit across from me. Before we even had our food, Paul stormed into the restaurant and was in my face, shouting about how dare I date that man, and I was a whore. And the restaurant was silent, except for Paul. I was beyond embarrassed. The man sitting across from me stood up and grabbed Paul by the arm, unceremoniously dragging him outside. 10 minutes later, my friend returned while Paul didn't. I didn't ask, but I'm pretty sure Paul had the beat down of the century, because the other guy promised me Paul would be too afraid to hurt me now. For a few days, I had peace. But then he was back at it again, and now I wasn't the only target. My friends started receiving the calls too. They shared voice recordings from their phones with me. She's a cuss out. We all knew she was me. And then one day, it stopped. Everything stopped. And eventually, I started breathing again, until about 6 months later, a man I worked with called me. Annie, turn on the local 6 o'clock news now, he said. I switched my TV over and nearly dropped my phone. There was Paul's face splashed across the screen. Paul Michelson, 28, was arrested today. He is accused of violating a restraining order, kidnapping, and rape. Michelson confessed to all charges. I listened to the news anchor recount the gruesome story of how he'd taken a woman to a hotel room and brutally attacked and raped her. She survived and managed to escape the room, and another hotel guest helped her call 911. Paul admitted to police that he had intended to kill her. Police even stated they were shocked at how much he admitted. They didn't even have to interrogate him. He voluntarily poured out the whole story. It seems I had found peace because he had found another woman to harass. I've changed names to protect his family, who were kind people and always treated me well. It isn't their fault he became the man he is. It has been many, many years since he was sentenced to prison. I believe he comes up for parole in 2024. I hope he doesn't get it. I've mentioned here before that I've only ever dated older men. Paul was the one exception to that, though we stopped dating years before his arrest. All the time. Parents and students, especially the last 2 weeks of the grading period and again after report cards are sent out, come to me and ask me to raise grades so the student can have a passing grade or a better grade so they can get into college. I hear so many sob stories. I make it clear in my policies I do not change grades and I do not give extra credit points. Students have to do the regular work and turn it in on time. I have so many students turn in late work that I only give 10% credit for late work. Students who turn in late work are waiting to copy from a student who had their graded assignment returned. I tell them the 10% is for acting like a copy machine. I do not accept any late work during the last 3 weeks of a semester. If I did, I would get so much that it would be physically impossible for me to grade it all. When I was younger, I would try and would end up staying awake for 72 hours straight to do it. I ended up having a stroke, so I stopped this madness. I turn in my grades on the last day of the semester and go home and enjoy my break. I spend it with my family. There were 2 times a principal changed my grade for me. In CA, the teacher is the only one that can assign the grade. Administrators are not allowed by law to change grades or direct teachers to change grades. If an administrator directs a teacher to change a grade or changes a grade without the teacher's written permission and full cooperation, then the administrator can have action taken against their credential and can be immediately fired by the district. One time, I had a student who was a star basketball player. Unfortunately, he was a straight F student. On top of that, he had been suspended for fighting several times. He should have been expelled. The school board had a policy that students who got into fights twice in a year were to be expelled. He had been in 5 fights that he started by the time basketball season started, and he engaged in a few more fights during the basketball season. During the first semester, he earned all failing grades, and yet somehow he was allowed to play. The principal said that since he was a special education student, he could make an exception for the student. I knew that was wrong, so I reported it to the district. A few days later, the basketball coach was told to remove the student from the team. He was not qualified due to grades, and the principal could not make an exception. Within a few days, the student was back on the team. I asked the coach, and he said he made grades. I said he still had an F in my class and had an F in his math class. The math teacher was a good friend of mine. I was told he had C's in all of his classes. I checked his grades online. The coach was right. So I went to the registrar to fix the mistake with the biology grade. The math teacher did the same with the math grade. 2 F's disqualified the student from playing. She notified the coach and the district office. She then put in a request to find out how the grade changes happened. When a grade is changed, the system records the date and time and who did it. There is also supposed to be a written grade change request on file with the school's registrar. The investigation discovered the principal emailed the assistant superintendent of the district to ask him to change the grade so the kid could play basketball. The kid was black, and so was the principal and assistant superintendent. The reason was to provide this kid a chance to get a college scholarship through basketball. This kid was illiterate. He could not even read at the 1st grade level. He was a junior with 35 credits, 30 of which were not legitimate. All the grades were changed back. I filed a complaint that was heard by the school board. They took it up in a closed session. I testified, and the principal was asked to explain himself. He denied making the changes, even with his email. The assistant superintendent admitted his part. The school board voted to terminate the employment of both, effective immediately. Had they not, I would have filed a complaint with the State Commission on Credentialing. The second time was with the principal that was the replacement. I had a transfer student. She had been expelled from a private school, and she did not have a transfer grade. She transferred in halfway through the 2nd quarter. I informed her and her mother she would need to make up the work for the time she was not at our school since she did not have a transfer grade. If she did not make up that work and take those tests, she would be credited with 0 S for those assignments and would fail the semester. Mom thought this was not fair. It is not right that she gets a semester's worth of credit for 5 weeks of work. Our district does not offer partial credit. Mom wanted me to transfer the grade she claimed her daughter had before the expulsion without any proof. She said due to the expulsion, the private school would not provide transfer grades. It was not my problem, and I could not go on her word. The student did no work during the rest of that first semester, and so she failed. The second semester, she did work and maintained a grade of C. In that semester, I had a stroke and ended up being off for 2 years. Mom finally was able to get official transfer grades. The principal told Mom that I would change the grade to an A because that was her transfer grade in biology. The principal tried to change the grade, but the registrar refused and said I had to do it. The principal tried to call me at home and actually became upset because she could not understand me. She thought I was purposely avoiding her. I had lost the ability to speak and was paralyzed on my left side due to the stroke. It took 2 years of speech, physical, and occupational therapy to rehab. It took a year for my speech to be coherent enough for most people to understand me. Even then, I would still easily become confused. I could not go anywhere on my own because I would get lost, and while talking, I would forget what I was talking about. The first day back to work, the principal came to me and said I had to change the grade to A. She promised Mom I would, and told Mom the daughter would not have to make up the 1 semester of biology. I did not have a chance to see the transcripts or even look at the student's grade from 2 years before. I was trying to get back to dealing with the complexities of teaching, and I started a week into the 2nd semester. Well, it turned out the principal looked at the wrong transcript. She had the transcripts for another student with a similar name that had transferred into a different class of mine around the same time. I had calculated her grade correctly. The student that came from the private school still did not have transcripts. So I went to the registrar. She contacted the private school to have a frank discussion with their registrar. They sent us the records. The student had been expelled 6 weeks before she was enrolled in our school. Mom took a 6-week vacation before enrolling her daughter at our school. She had not been enrolled in biology at all. She had no biology transfer grade. I then printed out my emails from 2 years prior showing I offered to let the student make up the work, and Mom said she would not because there would be a transfer grade. I went to the principal and showed her what her mistake was. The principal did not want to go to Mom and own up to the mistake because it meant the daughter would not graduate. The principal directed me to change the grade. I said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" She said yes. I sent an email to the principal with a synopsis of the issue and asking again if she was directing me to change the grade. She responded by email that she was directing me to change the grade to an A. I filled out the change of grade form, and in the box for the reason I wrote directed by the principal to do so, even though the student has not earned an A and legitimately earned her F and has not done anything to warrant a change in the grade. I attached the email I sent to the principal and her response. I emailed the entire thing to the registrar. I then stopped by the registrar's office to make sure she had all she needed. She did. The next day, I got a notice to appear before a closed session of the school board the following week. Yep, you guessed it. The meeting was on a Tuesday night. During the meeting, the principal carefully explained why the grade should be changed, because she made a mistake due to both girls having very similar names. She had spoken to both mothers and confused them and thought this was all about the same student. She had promised that the grade would be changed, and because of that, the girl did not take the 1 semester of biology when she had a chance, and now it is too late to do so, and she would not be able to graduate due to the principal's mistake. She is further confused to be explaining this before the school board because she thought I was okay with this. I did tell her that for being a former English teacher, she really has little reading comprehension. What part of "if you direct me to change the grade, I will take this to the school board because this is unethical and a violation of the education code?" At the conclusion, she was terminated and told to not bother returning to school on Wednesday. What is the hardest thing you have ever done? I recently was released from an Alabama prison. I spent 2 years in prison. I was sent there when I was 17. I am 19 now. The Alabama prisons are a horrible place. I was a sheltered child growing up. When I was 17, my father forced me to steal from some people because we didn't have any money. I did not want to do it. My father forced me to. I begged and pleaded with him. I used to love to play video games. I haven't now played games in years, since I was probably 15. That part inside of me sort of died. I was, and am still tall, and kind of thin. The first place I went was one of the worst places. the juvenile wedge in the Mobile Metro Jail. A wedge holds 8 cells and is supposed to only hold 2 juveniles per cell per 2 bunks. But there were sometimes up to 4 people per cell, forcing kids to sleep on the mats on floor and right near the toilet. The 16 and 17-year-olds in Alabama jails are horrible and the most violent of all inmates. I can look back and understand the reader's thoughts. They probably are curious to know how age 15, 17-year-olds could be so violent. But Alabama, if you have actually visited, is a very rough place, especially the projects. I was in this jail with the teens, who were the ones that committed the worst crimes: first-degree robberies, murders, arson, theft, rape, and molestation. I was the only white boy. They always attempted to steal from me and rob me and literally terrorize me, throwing piss on me or spitting in my drinking cup. They let the inmates fill up the other inmates' drinking cups. The first week there, I bought a $1.20 phone card. And when I came back to my cell, the black kids were waiting for me in there. Predators. They had put a towel over the cell's only light to darken the cell so the guards couldn't see what was about to happen. And they surrounded me once I had walked back into the cell. I told them I would not give them the phone card. I actually intimidated them. I was grabbed from behind and put into a chokehold. Then I blacked out. I woke up from underneath the steel metal desk with blood dripping down the side of my face. The phone card was gone. After that, I spent an entire year in a cell by myself because I had to be separated from them. Throughout that amount of time, I saw over 100 fights and was sleep-deprived quite a lot. The juveniles would scream and yell and cuss each other out all the time. They were animals. They would talk about the most hateful, vile things and how gangster they were, drug dealing and robbing. It was utterly saddening, especially at night. They would beat on the metal over and over and over and rap, all of them together. In no way am I racist, nor prejudiced towards a certain taste of music. I like rap myself sometimes. During the time I was in jail, I heard news about my father. Months later, a correctional officer actually was the one to give me news that my father had been arrested himself. He had stolen from more people, the same exact way he had made me do it, and was in jail. He would finally pay for what he had done to me, but there are no laws protecting kids from what their parents force them to do. Sadly, quite a horrible thing for the legal system to do to kids. The juvenile wedge was located right next to the suicide wedge, the loudest wedge in the entire 2,000-plus jail. That is where they put the drunks, the crazy psychopaths who had just murdered their whole family, and even more nut jobs. One man gouged his father's eyes out with a spoon. I can reference that as well. They would beat constantly and scream and moan all night long. I remember specifically the ones who would never stop beating on the clear plexiglass walls of the suicide cells. They were in there naked, all of them. At one time, I saw my own father in there, after he had gotten jumped in another wedge, and his nose broken, and both eyes completely blackened. They put him in there for protection. I remember hearing the guards running in there and beating the hell out of those people, and hearing the inmates scream. I was right next to those cells. I lost lots of sleep over the constant noise. Bang, bang, bang. Banging over and over and over for hours, all night. It was just like a lunatic asylum. I did read a lot of the Christian Bible when I actually believed in that kind of stuff, and other books as well. It was my only solace then, and learning, I yearned to read and learn. I was constantly a target with the black people because I was a white boy. I was deeply miserable, and so I got the doctors to finally give me sleep medicine after many months, Remerons, which made me feel like I was slow when I took them, but sleepy. They took a very long time to wear off. I started to slide them in the inside of my mouth when the nurse would give them to me, and I would spit them out when I got back to my cell and hide them in a hole in my inch-thick mat. I had no pillow, just a wool blanket. Before I went to prison and was waiting in limbo in jail, I thought there was a chance that I might be sent to prison. So, over a long amount of time, I started to collect those sleeping pills just in case. So, I could protect myself if I was given a long amount of time in prison or whatever. Things got more miserable. I stopped a young black kid from committing suicide in my cell at one point. I turned 18 in jail. After that, I mixed in with the adults. I finally received my time. It was 2 more years, and I would be going to prison. I couldn't do it anymore. I was utterly miserable and sad, and I lost the will to want to be alive. I wanted peace, just once in my life. If you call death peace. One night, I took all the Remerons I had collected. I first waited for my cellmates to begin playing cards, and then I took around 100 of them and heated up some hot water and crushed up some of the pills and swallowed them all down. It was the worst, bitter, disgusting taste. I still have a hard time swallowing pills. If I ever have to chew them, I wrote a note telling my mother I loved her and wished I could hug her. No one knows the truth or what really happened. No one cares to know. I hadn't seen her in 8 years. I got up on my top bunk and rolled over on my side on my mat and laid there. I prayed to God, asking to be with him. I commend to you my spirit, Lord. I was completely terrified of going to hell, but I still did it. I was in so much misery. 30 minutes later, my body was almost paralyzed, and my body was pulsing and throbbing. I began to feel very sick. I tried as hard as I could to hold my stomach in, but I had to get up and go to the toilet to vomit, and my whole body was almost paralyzed. I could not jump off my rack. I couldn't move, and then I blacked out. Into nothingness, silence, blackness. There was no bright light. Over the course of that period, while I was in jail, I had many inmates, criminals, try to hurt me. Later, I woke up in a hospital handcuffed to a stretcher. I was on life support. My cellmates had gotten scared and told the guards once they had seen me black out. I obviously did not want my cellmates to know what I had done, but I was forced to throw up and black out. After my ill recovery, I was thrown into the suicide wedge, right where I remembered all those people. I soon was shackled and shipped to prison, where there was no AC at all. There's none in the Alabama prisons. Prison is even worse. You are forced to work all day, and the temperatures inside the dorms get to 100+ degrees every day, all day long, during the hot, long Alabama summers. Misery. I remember pools of sweat collecting on my mat. While I tried to lay down, I would have to strip to my underwear to stay cooler. The black men would look at me, and some would masturbate at me while I would sleep, or do it right in front of me. They call it gunning you down. It was a fact that the African American men were specifically like this. A lot of the time when I would try to take a quick shower, they would all watch me to see when I would go in, and then go in the shower with me and watch me and gun me down while I bathed myself quickly. Quite a dehumanizing thing to have done to you. I wish I could have knocked one of those mother*******s heads off, but I knew I had parole coming up, and I might make it if I never get into any fights or disciplinaries, which was even worse, because I needed to stand up for myself. It was so crowded in prison. There was no privacy. Nowhere. Showers were completely wide open. Toilets were in rows of 30 lined up. No stalls. Those did not exist. I tried dearly to avoid the showers and the sick people. I saw a lot of sick stuff in there. The white gay boys were the ones that almost always were on the receiving end of the action. Homemade hypodermic needles, and one of the main drugs, called Suboxones. They were these thin sublingual films from a pharmacy that were smuggled in. They are a narcotic analgesic, and they dissolve fast. The drug addicts broke up and dissolved the film in a spoon and either snorted or injected it. I did none of that. I had never done drugs before. A dear friend of mine was hit by a car and was in a coma for 6 months. I was his power of attorney, and he and I had talked about this for a long time, mostly as a joke, but also quite serious. I asked the doctor after 6 months, what are the chances he will wake up? The doctor looked at me and said, at this point, less than 1 in 10 million. The only part of his brain that isn't damaged is his brainstem. I ordered them to pull the plug. It was what we had agreed on. Keep in mind, this guy talked me out of suicide more times than I can remember. And after I had them pull the plug, I had to go tell his fiancée, who had just given birth to their daughter, what I had done. The hardest part of all that wasn't making the call or telling her. It's been watching this little girl grow up the last 3 years with only a picture of her daddy. That's the end. I hope you enjoyed it. Watch for more videos and also subscribe to the channel.